Good morning, everyone. I am testing sound for our live stream.
We can hear you great, Brandy.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Anita Earls, and I am thrilled to welcome you to this meeting of the North Carolina Task Force on Racial Equity in Criminal Justice. We have a packed agenda, so I'm going to move us right along, but I want to, first of all, let you all know there's a slight change to the agenda. After we have our presentation and questions and answers, I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to alert you all to an announcement that the U.S. Department of Justice made yesterday about fines and fees, and solicit your input on how we might make use of that, and then we'll go to our committee reports. I'm thrilled to be seeing all the work that the committees are doing, and really excited to hear from our committee chairs so that we all can stay abreast of what the task force is engaged in. But I'm also very thrilled that we today are addressing the issue of police culture and how that can be impacted. And I think that the importance of that was yet again highlighted for me when I reviewed a complaint letter that Emancipate North Carolina has filed or sent to the U.S. Department of Justice. And in that letter, there's a note about information that they have received, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but just one of the comments was a police department member saying that there are hundreds of policies that are on paper that are supposed to be followed as a practice and are not. Just again highlighting how police culture makes such a big difference in the ability of the policies that we've recommended and the policies that are being adopted, the ability of those to actually ultimately result in the kind of change that we want to see. So I'm very grateful to our guest who's going to be with us today, and for all of you for joining to hear this. With that, I'll turn it over to my esteemed co-chair, Secretary Buffalo.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair Justice Earls, for setting the stage for today's panel discussion. I have the distinct pleasure and honor in welcoming our guest today is Chief Kevin Roberts. Chief Roberts is with the Clayton County Police Department. And I'll give you a little background of his career. He started with the Georgia Department of Corrections in 1994. And after 4 years with the Department of Corrections, he joined the Clayton County Police Department in 1998. There, he was dedicated with deep passion and conviction in law enforcement over the next 20 years, where he solidified his career by moving up through the ranks there at Clayton County, and was promoted from a patrol officer to the rank of sergeant, and then from lieutenant to lead the special operations unit there. He was very intentional about what he was doing in his career and became a captain over the Uniform Patrol Division and the CID, and was promoted to the rank of major. So you can see his career track has taken him on to higher places. Ultimately, he was promoted in 2017 to the Deputy Chief of Field Operations. And on January the 16th of 2018, he was appointed as the Chief of Police there in Georgia at Clayton County. So Chief, it's my pleasure to welcome you to our TREC meeting today, and to our TREC members and those online. I present to you none other than Chief Roberts. Thank you, Chief, for being here.
Thank you, Secretary, for the introduction. I'm very humbled to be in this space with these great leaders to have this discussion. I don't know how I got so lucky. I don't know if lucky is the word, but I don't mind sharing, because if I'm sharing with these great leaders, I'm sure it's something I can take away from this engagement, hopefully to apply in our space in Clayton County. Just a little bit more about our department. We're allotted over 500 personnel, with 390 of those personnel being sworn officers. Our department has two branches, as previously discussed: Field Operations Command and Support Operations Command. Field Operations is led by our Assistant Chief, Assistant Chief Bruce Parks. That encompasses Uniform Patrol, Narcotics, Special Operations, and our Criminal Investigations Division. And Support Operations encompasses everything else, which ranges from our E911 communications, our animal control. We previously had code enforcement, but that was transferred to another agency within the county. We serve a community of about 300,000 residents in a 144 square mile space. That's a lot of people in a small area, which creates a lot of contact and a very active community, as I described to many of our citizens in that space. That being said, I've been chief a little bit over 5 years, and we have had a myriad of critical incidents that impacted our agency. And I'll just use one for this discussion about police culture. And you may have seen it. I think it was in late 2020 or early 2021. We had an incident where one of our lieutenants engaged 5 teenage males as a result of a call that we received at a convenience store, and he had his weapon drawn. And he met these males on the side of the road. And while he was conducting his investigation with these 5 teenagers, a citizen got out of her car, brought out her cell phone, and began to record the interaction, and thus posted it immediately to social media. And it grew legs faster than anything I ever saw, to the extent that we had people around the world emailing, calling, tying up my phones for about 3 weeks, calling for his resignation. And the tagline was that, once again, police misuse of power or abuse of power, and they were calling for his head. And actually, we had folks that came to our agency unannounced and requested my presence, and I obliged them and engaged them. Of course, they recorded that and put it online as well. But where I'm going, there was a national narrative about police culture that was overwhelmingly negative. It was the beginning of the anti-police narrative before we actually got in or ran along with the defund the police movement at the time. And of course, it would have been easy for me to, well, not easy in theory for me to just comply with the request, but there were gaps in the communication with the community, and there were gaps in what people understood about the interaction. They had a snapshot of probably about 45 seconds of an investigation that was over an hour long. What the young lady missed when she engaged our officer with the cell phone was the fact that he'd already been notified by the complainant of the convenience store that these 5 teens were possibly armed. So when he exited his vehicle and made contact with them on the side of the roadway, he had his weapon drawn and was given verbal instructions to those teenagers, and they were compliant. The teens were not the problem, and neither were the officer. The problem was the citizen that had a piece of the information and released that information out of context, and it grew legs very quickly because of the understanding of police culture at the time, which was pretty much anti-police. After reviewing and releasing the body camera footage in its entirety, the story changed from an officer abusing his power to an officer completing a thorough investigation and being safe. And as you listen to the body camera footage, you heard the officer engaging these young men in a very professional tone, telling them to ignore the noise from those individuals who were stopping on the side of the road to agitate this situation. He was able to inquire of those teens where the gun was that they displayed in the convenience store. The teens led him back to the gun that they had tossed in the wood line in their travel from the convenience store to where our lieutenant engaged them. The culture at the time was to sacrifice your officers. I'm not built like that. The officer was doing his job, and it's my responsibility as his chief to support him in that capacity. And we got a lot of pushback, but once we released the body camera footage, we were able to quell that and actually turn that negative into a positive, but it took a long time. It took about approximately a month for us to get on the other side of that thing. We had, as I said, an unannounced interaction with individuals who did not live in Clayton County space. I had folks that had traveled through Georgia from Chicago standing on the steps of our Clayton County Police Department, calling for the termination of an officer in a community where they did not live, but they had made an assumption based on the national culture narrative of police that the officer had acted out of order. And we did not comply with that. And where I'm going with this whole discussion is culture lies with leadership. It lies with leadership, oversight, and training. Our officer in that space was following his training, he was following his policy, and it was up to his leadership to support him when he was correct. And we did that. Now, other indicators of culture also fall within the department. I can give you an informal example of one of our specialized units where there was a high number of complaints relative to specific individual officers. And once we dug in, we saw that those officers were not working in alignment with our policy and procedure. And we immediately, upon discovery, removed them from that space. Now, Secretary Buffalo articulated that at one time I led the Special Operations Unit as a lieutenant. It was a group of very high-strung, aggressive police officers, but I'm a little bit high-strung and aggressive in compliance with policy and the way we do our job. Now, I mentioned that because I talked about oversight and training. When you have those type of specialized units, in my opinion, you have to have the right leader in place that's going to be with those individuals to ensure that compliance and accountability piece. And I was able to do that then as a lieutenant, and I'm able to recognize in this space as a chief when those things are lacking and change those metrics and get the right people in those spaces and get the wrong people out, which may mean up to and including termination from the department, but most definitely immediate removal from those type of spaces. And we may be able to recover those employees with training. But the bottom line is those three things, training, oversight, and leadership, are key to changing police culture. And there has to be an element of accountability. With that, also, I feel that we've shown transparency in the way that we do things. I spoke about the first example with our lieutenant where we released the body camera footage. We've done that so much more now and so much more quicker. It's a habit. We've had officer-involved shootings. I told my team when we have those things, I want the body camera footage prepared for release. I may or may not release it, but I need to prepare it for our community so that we ensure that they know our agency is going to be transparent about the way we do things, and it enhances the trust that they have in our department. Once again, when we talk about changing culture, it falls heavily on my shoulders and the shoulders of my command staff. And as you look at different incidents happening nationally, I think it occurs that way for many other agencies. And when you dig in to those agencies that have culture problems, somewhere in there, there's a gap in leadership. So I'm gonna stop talking now. I did not have 40 minutes. I did not have a PowerPoint, but I wanted to give you a foundation of what we're trying to continue doing here at Clayton County, and I'll be glad to take some questions at this time.
Are there any questions from any of the committee members? If so, I'll try to recognize you, changing.
Yeah, hey, Secretary Buffalo, I have a question to Chief Jennings in Charlotte.
Chief, go right ahead.
Hey, Chief Roberts, thanks for leading this conversation. Certainly appreciate you doing this. One of the things that we saw, especially since 2020, is that we've all had to make significant changes in policies and training and a lot of other things that and how we actually deal with the people that we come in contact with out in public. So the internal culture that we discuss all the time is, as you know, police officers are probably the most resistant to change. And I guess my question is, did you make any significant changes that specifically dealt with internal culture? And what was the pushback you received from the officers or even all of the employees that you had?
I got a couple. And to your point, you're absolutely correct. When we talk about the traditions that might have come before me or you in the space of the chief, I'll give you an example. As we struggled through the pandemic, we had challenges getting resources like vehicles and body cameras due to supply chain challenges and things of that nature. So vehicles are at a premium. Historically in our agency, if you had an accident and it was chargeable or your fault, it started out at a letter. You got a letter reprimand. No matter if you totaled a police car or you put a scratch on a police car, you got the same thing. If you had a second accident within the first 24 months, within a 24-month period, that might elevate to a day, no matter whether you scratched the bumper on a pole or you totaled 2 police cars. That made absolutely no sense to me, especially as we entered a period of pandemic where resources were limited. We needed a heavier level of accountability. So I created a matrix that related to the value of the damage caused, not only to our police cars, but to other vehicles that may be involving citizens. And when those parameters changed, and they were very much different because we took value into consideration, our officers began to see some heavier discipline because they were causing heavier damage in my mind. There was immediate pushback and wanting to have discussions about it being heavy-handed or whatever. But I thought it was irresponsible as an agency and a leadership not to take into account the amount of damage caused to county vehicles and city vehicles involved in accidents with our officers. Of course, as a chief, you know, we look for results. What I saw in turn was a immediate reduction in the amount of chargeable accidents that we were having in the agency. And eventually over time, the resistance waned as we kept driving home the purpose and the rationale for the change. So communication was key. The other thing, when it comes to behavioral challenges or cultural related challenges, Chief, you and I both know bad culture when we see it, and it's our responsibility to eliminate it. And if I walk through the door as a chief with a message on how we're going to do business, I have to follow that with action. So we know there's formal and informal leaders within the agency that can have an impact on the culture. I directly address those formal and informal leaders who are having a negative impact on the culture, and we will be in conflict. And my response to that is, you will not win. I'm the chief of police. I set the culture for the agency. And if your behavior or culture doesn't align with what I want for this agency, then we are not aligned and one of us has to go. And that's the messaging and the tone that I think the leadership should set for your agency. And also with, of course, we gotta understand the politics, but also with the elected officials who have endorsed you or endorsed us as the leader, they have to know who I am and how I feel about it. So whatever I'm telling the troops is the same conversation I have with my bosses, the chief operating officer, the chairman of the board, and the commissioners. I might not be in the chair long. I've been able to make it for 5 years, but my tone or my approach is who I am. And if it aligns with what the community wants and accepts, I think it'll be better suited. But you have to be clear. We have to be clear as leaders on our expectations of the troops and the way we're going to serve the citizens, if that answers your question.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hawkins, see your hand is raised, sir.
Yes, thank you, Secretary Buffalo. Chief Roberts, first, thank you for taking the time to join us. It's a complicated topic, but I want to ask a question based on the latter part of your last answer, your communications with your elected officials and other members of the community. My question is more broad than that, though. How well do you think, what do you do to try to make sure that the community...
Did I lose him?
I think he froze up. Mr. Hawkins, you still with us? Okay, we'll come back to him in just a second. Any other member have a question or comment for Chief Roberts?
Secretary, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Judge Thornburg, go right ahead, sir.
Yes, Chief, I'm in Asheville, North Carolina. My question is, have you had success in recruiting kind of new officers that you would like to have in your department, and how have you gone about using the culture or telling these prospective officers about the culture that they will be coming into? And if you have, how has that gone for you?
Judge, I'm glad you asked about recruitment. Let me say it on screen. I won't get any responses. Don't get mad at me, Chief. We are hiring. We're hiring. We're hiring. We do have our recruitment challenges, but I try to be totally as transparent as possible with both the community, our current officers, and any officers who express interest. Because when they're engaging with me on the first time and you have an interview, I'm asking them why we should allow them to join our Clayton County Police Department family. Because we're family. We have our bumps in the road here and there. So I'm trying to set the culture from day one when they're going through the application process. And then as they matriculate through that process, they will see me the first week of the academy during the instruction on ethics and professionalism, so we can set the tone once again for what is expected of them as an officer at this agency. I have only missed one class since I've been chief due to a scheduling conflict, but we can discuss police culturally related issues and ethics in that class, and they can hear it out the chief's mouth. If you violate the law in your performance of duties as a police officer, you can expect the chief of police to be the firm proponent for taking you into custody, not just terminating you, but taking you into custody. And we discuss particular incidents with these young men and women as they come in. They're much younger now, and I think they want clarity when you engage them from day one. They want the family atmosphere. They want to belong to something. They want clarity on how to achieve whatever they desire in their career path. How do I get to CID? I'm sure Chief can attest to when we came on, nobody told you how to get to where you want to be. You kind of had to figure it out. We created a roadmap within the agency called the Gateway Plan. So when you hit the police department, if you aspire to be on a SWAT team, there's a database with all the minimum requirements, recommended education and training, and things you need to know to get you where you want to be as far as the scores on your evaluations and every other thing that's going to make you the best competitive candidate to achieve your goal within the agency. So transparency and communication from day one with our recruits, transparency and communication the following days as they progress over the years about how they get to where they want to go. What I found with our applicant population, they need more information than the previous generations. They're not just going to sit around and wait and hope that they get somewhere. They know where they want to go when they come. You need to tell them how to get there, and we need to, as leaders in agencies, help them get to where they want to go. As far as recruitment goes, we've had to change our recruitment strategy. I know when I came on, it was just about a waiting list to join the agency. That is no longer the case. The traditional approaches to recruitment that we had previous years, we had to change those. Now we're doing nighttime hiring events where the applicant can come out, take our physical agility test, get a preliminary background screening. If they meet those minimum requirements, they can have a one-on-one with the chief with a conditional offer of employment at the end that lets them know, hey, you got a conditional offer of employment with this agency today. We are going to continue the background process, but you walk out of here with a job. If all goes well, you'll keep the job contingent upon that background process being clean. And I will say over the last 4 to 5 months, we've seen a substantial increase in our numbers because a lot of our applicants are employed elsewhere. So if we want to continue to do business only between 8 and 4 when our applicants are at work, we're cutting ourselves out the market. So we need to do our business where it doesn't cause the applicant to put their current employment in jeopardy. So that may mean Thursday night, we start the hiring process at 6. I may be in the office till 11 or midnight, seeing applicants who have run the PAA. They've gone through a preliminary check with our background and recruiting unit, and then they sit before the chief and tell me why they want to be a police officer and why I should allow them to join the agency. And we've seen success in that respect. I hope that answers your question, Judge.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I'm sorry I didn't raise my right hand. Mr. Hawkins, I believe you got interrupted or cut off.
Just for the record, CMPD's hiring too, and we're taking laterals.
Can somebody mute the chief?
Mr. Hawkins, you back with us, sir?
All right, can you hear me? Chief, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can.
Okay, I apologize. I live in a small town. The internet is in an, it's hit and miss here. So thank you for your patience. My question was just basically, we talk about culture, we think about culture, and it's a lot of it's inward focused, but also thinking about the interaction with the community as large. What sorts of things or what advice do you have for people to be able to, for organizations to be able to communicate to the public what your culture is, how you're trying to approach what you're doing, and enlist their help in helping you do your job in these oftentimes really difficult situations?
Sir, thank you for the question. And I left that piece out when I gave the example of about the lieutenant engaging the team. Our police department unannounced. They essentially came asking for the lieutenant's job and potentially my job. When they came, I engaged them outside on the steps of the police department, and we had a discussion, a very clear and transparent discussion about what I was and was not going to do and the why. And what came after that were citizens in our community who were also there on the steps that defended me in our police department because they already had a relationship with our agency, with me as the chief and our agency, because we are in a state of constant engagement with our communities through our faith forums, our neighborhood watches, our HOA meetings, our annual national night out event. we make a pointed effort to engage our communities regularly. So it's several neighborhood watch and HOA leaders who have my cell phone number and can pick up the phone and call me, or citizens just in general, because it's their phone. They pay for the phone with their government taxes. I should be accessible, and so should my subordinates. I think when we make ourselves accessible and we can answer questions prior to critical incidents happening, we lay a foundation of trust, which makes the community want to come back us. I recently had another event where one of my officers was assigned to a federal task force. He was involved in a shooting in the city of Atlanta with that task force. And of course, there were parties that feel like the shooting was not lawful. The investigating federal agency found that it was lawful, but yet there were individuals, once again, who were calling for his removal. And once again, there was no indication that he had violated policy within the agency. There was no indication that he had violated policy according to the federal investigating authority. So I felt it prudent that he remain until that matter is totally closed out. And once again, we had folks that came and basically asked for the chief's job, which is not a good feeling. It makes you look and see, am I doing the right thing? But what made me feel better was, once again, we had citizens that came to the police department in defense of the police department in that space. And I only think that happened because we engaged those citizens on a regular basis.
And could I follow up with another question? Thank you, Chief. Could I follow up with one more, Secretary Buffalo?
Oh, absolutely, sir. Thank you.
Chief, also a different topic, but how internally, how do you measure culture? How do you have measurables that you think about and say, okay, we're hitting this target or we're not hitting this target? How do you measure your success in it?
Oh, commonly, I'm sure chiefs will attest to this. We look at complaints oftentimes, but just the sheer number of complaints is not a good measure, because complaints can be sustained or not sustained or unfounded. So what I like to dig into is not only our total number of complaints, but how many of those complaints are sustained and how many of those complaints are based in sustained violations of policy and or training methods. And as those violations decrease, then I think we are maintaining a culture that's most beneficial to our community. Secondarily, not only complaints, but how many unsolicited commendatory notifications do we get from the community? And we get a lot. And when they come in, I like to make the effort to attach a formal recognition from the chief's office to those officers. So you have good solicitations from the community, and in essence, you have negative notification from the community when they feel that we may be working out a policy or whatever. And as you dig into that, if you see a common trend with common officers and violations of policy, then you know that your culture is likely not aligned and not going in the direction that you want it to. Now, complaints in and of itself are not the complete measure, because you get complaints, you can get demeanor complaints, excessive force complaints, all type of complaints. But you as the leader, or we have the leaders of the agency, need to review and ensure that there's not complaints attached to negative cultural trends within the agency that relate to training and performance, if that makes sense.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from any members?
So if I may ask a question?
Yes, Justice Earls.
Thank you. Chief Roberts, thank you so much. This has been really fascinating. I especially appreciated your distinction between sort of the culture outside the department and then the culture inside the department. And that made me think about, on the question of accountability. It seems like a lot of what you said is both good accountability and a positive culture within the department is down to leadership. And you've really highlighted, some really important and key principles of how you operationalize that. But I guess that leads me to have the question: what would you advise a task force like this, a group of stakeholders that is diverse? We have attorneys, members of the public, victims representatives, legislators, judges, wide cross section. What are there things from your experience that we could do that would help with the internal culture piece and the accountability part of your management role?
I would say this task force is great, and I've been able to participate in similar panels or discussions. But I think what's helpful is earlier I talked about positional and informal leaders. That could be a patrolman, and a patrolman whose work ethic and reputation carries weight within the agency to the extent that his word may be stronger than somebody wearing rank. When you have those type of individuals in spaces, we need to include them in the conversation when we can. They may not stay for the whole thing, but it would be prudent, I think, to hear from those individuals, because I've learned a lot, unfortunately, during exit interviews that lets me know how important the leadership is to the culture of the agency. And unfortunately, sometimes people are walking out the door when they're saying these things because they might not be able to get to the chiefs to say it. And it may be 3 or 4 months until we get to their space and have a one-on-one with them in passing and share that information. It needs to be all inclusive. You talked about the police chiefs, sheriffs, and judges on this call, and the many executives. But what's prudent, if we want to keep these young officers and deputies in space, we got to listen and hear their voice and allow them a platform to share their information too.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? I'm trying to look through the entire screen, so just bear with me. Chief Roberts, any closing remarks for us, sir? I don't see any other questions. We definitely thank you for your time, and well, stand by. There's an alibi. There's the DA. Got a question for you.
Yes, Mr. Secretary. I have a comment I'd like to add sort of to that last point. I think one thing that those of us kind of outside police agencies could do, when we talk about accountability, kind of everybody on this call, or a lot of people on this call, have a role of accountability for police. And we a lot of times talk more about it when we're exercising accountability when there's an accusation of wrongdoing or error, or criminal activity even. And I think that is a really important part of what we do. I think it's an important part of what DAs do, what judges do, community elected leaders. But I think I'm a big advocate for pairing that with what I'd call positive accountability, and balancing that with speaking out when police have done things that are, which is most of the time, that are positive things, that are good things, that are meritorious and heroic things. And again, I've never been a police officer. I've just been a assistant DA and now DA for several years. And I think that my guess, I'd be interested if the chief agrees or disagrees, that if the only time that police officers are ever kind of hearing those of us outside police speaking out about police conduct is when it's examining or holding account accusations of wrongdoing, I think that probably has a deleterious effect on internal police culture. They think that those of us outside police only care about what police do when we're calling out wrongdoing. So I'm a big advocate for also really being intentional about calling out the majority of police action, which is helpful and positive for our community.
thank you for that, those remarks. I'm glad you said that, sir. Is a chief or sheriff that serves your jurisdiction on this call?
No, but we had a local roundtable where we had a really similar discussion and that had chiefs and our local sheriff, and we kind of had a parallel discussion on this issue just yesterday.
And the reason I ask is I have a great relationship with our district attorney and our solicitor general. The district attorney began her law enforcement, her career as solicitor when I got hired at the police department. So we kind of grew up in the county together, and we are very transparent and candid about things. And she will not hold her tongue when she feels like our officers are out of line. And I appreciate that, because once again, we're talking about transparency and messaging to the community, the officers, and all of the elected officials. So they know if the DA is saying that she's about to bring charges to against our officers, she's likely already met with me, and we are likely on one accord. And the same thing with the solicitor's office. So when we talk about messaging and culture, our district attorney and our solicitor general are unified in what we expect as culture in our community from law enforcement. So I totally agree, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Well, Chief, I definitely appreciate it personally, and thank you. As everyone know, we had a last minute change yesterday. Reached out to Chief. Oh, another alibi. Oh, no, yes.
No, sir, I apologize.
Okay, no problem. Reached out to Chief yesterday at the last minute, and he was able to work us in his schedule. So, Chief, we give you a virtual round of applause for being with us today. And I just wanted to remind you and Chief Jennings that the North Carolina Department of Public Safety is hiring, and in all of our law enforcement agencies in North Carolina. So we definitely look forward to anyone that wants to apply from Clayton County or Charlotte.
Well, I thank you for that, Secretary. Thank you for the time. I hope I didn't offend anybody. It was not my intent, and I'm not long-winded. So I thank you for this brief interaction, and everybody be safe and have a great day.
Thank you, Chief. We'll be in touch.
Will do.
Justice Earls, I'll turn it back over to you for the fines and fees discussion, ma'am.
Yes, thank you so much. So we're switching gears, and I just wanted to kind of update everyone that yesterday, the Department of Justice, and I think it's significant, several entities within the Department of Justice, so both the Civil Rights Division, the Office of Access to Justice, as well as the Office of Justice Programs. So several units within the Department of Justice, led by the Associate Attorney General Vanita Gupta, announced the issuance of a guidance document. They call it a Dear Colleague letter, but it's a 20-page document in which the department lays out their view on a number of topics, but a lot of it is their position on the constitutional principles. They identify 7 constitutional principles flowing from the U.S. Constitution, most of them relating to the 14th Amendment or the 8th Amendment. And I will spare you, as a lawyer, I'd love to go through all of them, but I'll spare you that level of detail right now. We'll send you the link to the announcement and the document so you can see for yourself. Some of it builds on the earlier guidance. So in 2016, the department issued a guidance which was used by, when the task force came along in 2020 and was considering this issue, advocates who gave us materials included the Department of Justice guidance. It was something that our recommendation was at least somewhat based on. But some of the constitutional principles, I think, are quite, and of course, it's documented by
their case law and, and they also make clear that this is not, they're not asserting that this is binding on jurisdictions, but the department does have certain enforcement responsibilities. So it is useful for state and local governments to know what the Department of Justice view is about the law. But principles like that grossly disproportionate fines and fees could be a violation of the Eighth Amendment, that incarceration for failure to pay fines and fees without first conducting a hearing on whether or not the defendant has the ability to pay could be a 14th Amendment violation. And so it's a pretty comprehensive outline of their view of the law. And then coupled with the announcement of a grant program, a technical assistance and grant program. So they want to collaborate with court leaders, state and local stakeholders to develop and share solutions around fines and fees, which would involve grant funding as well as technical assistance. And the overall goal is to reduce the use of unjust fines and fees, redirect the resources used in those systems. So their view is the resources that are being used to attempt but not necessarily successfully collect fines and fees are not contributing to public safety. And so by coming up with solutions and, I think some things similar to what the TREC report recommended, that they can free up resources to devote to other activities within the criminal justice system that actually have a greater return in terms of impacting and positively impacting public safety. So I just wanted to make you all aware of that, but then raise the question. So this is where I want feedback and like lots of hands raised. Is there any way that we can use this announcement and guidance in North Carolina to further our work? As you're thinking of that question, a separate question, is there more that the U.S. Department of Justice can do? Is there data or research that would be, that they could provide that would help us in our efforts? One question I have is, can we use the letter to inform defendants? I like my first answer to that is probably not, because it is really a pretty intense legal document about, citing cases and constitutional rights. But, maybe defense attorneys to kind of crystallize the legal basis for a lot of the recommendations that we've been making about how to reduce both the initial imposition of fines and fees, but then helping people who've already had those imposed get relief from them. So I just wanted to throw it open to you all's thinking and any initial suggestions or ideas. I'm working on a screen where I'm not sure that I'm seeing everyone, particularly if you're muted. So please just speak up. Oh, thank you. It looks like April Dawson just put it in the chat, the link to the letter. Thank you.
Well, I'll start. Justice Earls, thank you so much for sharing this. I did not see this yesterday, and I think this is really exciting news. I think it absolutely will help provide us with additional ammunition and inform the work that we do in this space going forward. Yeah. So I don't have much more to add to that, but I share your enthusiasm and excitement, and I'm looking forward to kind of diving into it and seeing the constitutional arguments and trying to figure out how we can leverage having the Department of Justice kind of recognizing or continuing to recognize the importance of this area.
Thanks. DA, yes, just DA Neiman, I see your hands up.
Thank you, Justice Earls. I'm excited to see this too. I will say, whether it's helpful or not, that I feel not I feel. I would say that in our Cabot, Orange County, we have in the last couple of years really become pretty robust in this area as far as being intentional at the time of disposition of case of conducting a meaningful hearing on ability to pay, having, and I can't remember the form number now, and I'm embarrassed. I'm sure most of the people here, form 4 something. Having those available, very readily available at 4:15. Thank you. At the time of disposition for everything from minor traffic offenses to more serious offenses for both pro se and represented defendants, and work with our criminal justice resource department to do retroactive hearings for cases that have already been disposed. And I guess this really sounds like one big old humble brag, and I don't mean it for that, but I guess perhaps this provides some something extra to kind of evangelize being more intentional and proactive about doing what really the law already allows for, but I don't know how often it's being done around the state. But just a statement to say that full support of doing this kind of meaningful, thoughtful work and trying to get it done more broadly.
Well, but that suggests to me, and thank you so much for that comment, that suggests to me that you might be a resource for them as they're identifying best practices and trying to tell other jurisdictions, other courts, other, even around the country, trying to say, yes, you can do this. And yes, this is, it can be implemented. It seems to me you might be a resource for them.
Right, because
yeah, I'd be happy to.
Yeah.
And I'd be interested, this is Nisha Williams, to find out more about how, because I think what the Judiciary Committee is looking more into is how do we train judges and prosecutors to best implement Form 14. And a lot of that is discretionary. So how do we inform judges appropriately on what are the considerations that they're making? As a practicing attorney who practiced many years in child support court, I often would see conversations with defendants about their inability to pay. And oftentimes if they had a cell phone, that was something where the court looked at them where, oh, you're able to have a cell phone, you should be able to pay this. So just wanting to learn more about how do judicial officials and prosecutors really exercise that discretion, and what are the things that they're weighing as far as how to determine if someone can or cannot pay, especially as we live in a world where prices are rising for just housing as well as food.
And I think the guidance begins to address that, but that is an excellent point. So I will raise that later today. I'm gonna, oh yes, Emily, thanks. Go ahead, Emily Coward.
Thank you, Justice Earls. Thanks for bringing this to our attention. I'm really excited to see it. And I think it just dovetails really nicely with what we've been discussing in the Judicial Committee about additional training for lawyers and judges and others that are involved in the court system on best practices, the kind of things that DA Niemann was discussing. I think that in addition to your suggestion that DA Niemann could be a resource for them, I also think bringing Orange County actors to statewide trainings and programs that we will hopefully help develop around this issue and building awareness and understanding could be really helpful, and bringing folks down from the US DOJ to be involved in those programs that I hope that we will be putting on. I also just wanted to say that one of the things that I enjoy doing in my work is kind of trying to translate lengthy legal analysis into, 1 or 2 page go-bys for attorneys and practitioners that are a bit easier to implement. And so I'd also be interested just in the sense, akin to what was done with TREC 1.0 for, model policies and that sort of thing. I think we could help to translate this into, for different groups of actors, what does this mean? What can you do with this information? What should you be thinking of when you're out there every day exercising your discretion in this area, and how does it really impact people? So I would certainly be interested in being a part of those kinds of efforts. So thanks again for bringing it to our attention.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna move us along, but also we can, this will be something that the Judicial Committee continues to work on. And if I'm missing someone who wanted to make a comment, please get in touch with me. And I will just apologize to you all. I have to absolutely leave at 12:24. So please don't think I'm rude when I drop off right before the end of our meeting. But I'm going to move us to our committee updates and start with the Executive Committee, that should be from Lieutenant Garden. Are you here, and can you give us that report?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, great, thanks.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, everybody. The Executive Committee has met twice since the last full task force meeting. In our March meeting, we had a presentation from the Department of Adult Corrections from the Chief Deputy Secretary Harris. DAC has established, they briefed us on the establishment of a new standalone cabinet started on January 1. The Chief Deputy also briefed us on the priorities of the new agency and spoke about the medication-assisted treatment to prevent overdose, education, and rehabilitation. They also spoke about restorative justice. One of the other points that they made was the tablet initiative. It drew a real robust conversation throughout our meeting, and they gave us all the details about the tablets. All the facilities have tablets as of December 2022. The shared data showing that the tablets themselves have led to a decrease in assaults requiring outside medical treatment. In our April meeting, we had a presentation on the status and update of the North Carolina, hold on a second here, the North Carolina, lost my spot on my page here, on NCALEA, the CALEA program for North Carolina. Director Smythe gave that presentation. He discussed the benefits of accreditation and how the accreditation program can help law enforcement agencies pursue and demonstrate excellence. 4 agencies throughout North Carolina have already went through the pilot process. Open enrollment for additional agencies will begin this summer. In March, Governor Cooper established the new statewide Office of Violence Prevention. The mission of the new office will be to reduce violence and firearm misuse throughout North Carolina by coordinating the efforts across all the agencies throughout the state and partnering with local communities to support and deploy evidence-based and promising programs and strategies. Our committee, the Executive Committee, looks forward to working with the Office of Violence Reduction and Prevention and providing guidance and support where we can. And that's what we have from the Executive Committee. Any questions?
Great. Yeah, does anyone have any questions? Okay.
That was easy.
Yeah, please speak up if you do, but thank you so much for that report. And now the next report is the Judicial Committee, Judge Thornburg and Nisha Williams.
Hi, everyone. I'll be giving the update on behalf of the Judicial Committee. This month, our committee really focused on finding out ways to bring the reentry simulation to important power players, namely local legislators, judges, district attorneys, and other attorneys. 2 of our members, myself and Emily Coward, were able to attend a reentry simulation hosted by Our Journey, the Duke Human Rights Center, the Durham Reentry Council, and the Wilson Center at Duke Law. as well as the Prison Engagement Initiative. They were all sponsors for this Duke reentry simulation. The simulation that we attended was quite intense and informative. We, as a judicial committee, believe that bringing awareness to issues faced regarding reentry post-incarceration is crucial in promoting equity in criminal justice reform. We have organized a subcommittee off of our committee that will be organizing a special reentry simulation event. I am the chair of this subcommittee. We are today making an ask to all TREC board members if they would like to volunteer and serve on this planning committee. We are looking for at least 5 additional members. We believe this work is also not only crucial to the work of the Judicial Committee, but at minimum, at least the Legislative and Local Policies Committee, as well as the Executive Committee, because so much of the reentry ask involve funding, and funding from local communities as well as funding through our legislature. And so we are hoping that this reentry simulation could take place at NCCU University. We are currently working with Professor Dawson, who works at NCCU Law, to organize, see if we can get space and a date that will allow for ample parking. We are looking to have between 60 to 100 people attend this event. So what that means is we are looking for between 30 to 60 important power players to register for this event. We know it's a pretty big, wild ask to ask 60 important folks who have very busy schedules to make it to such an event. But we believe that we need a lot of people at this event to make the simulation truly feel, truly get what needs to, what folks need to receive out of the simulation. Our plan is also, depending on how many people we have registered, to have law students as well as criminal justice students also participate, so that we are going to have a full group. We will again be asking TREC members to tap into their networks as we follow along with the process of the simulation when it gets time to send out invitations. But prior to then, we are asking board members who are interested in helping me plan this event to reach out to me via email. I will put my email in the chat so you can contact me, or you can also contact Brandy McCoy or Chief Justice Earls if you are interested in volunteering in this event. We believe this is crucial. We initially wanted to have this go before our General Assembly. However, with the fast-moving pace that they've been going on this summer, we're not sure if we can get into their schedule. So we're hoping that we may be still able to get some legislatures at this simulation, as well again as judges, district attorneys, police chiefs, who all that we can tap in to attend. And please listen out for us as we plan on giving you monthly updates as well. Thank you. And any questions, I'm here.
Thank you. And there may be TREC members who couldn't be at this meeting, but who might want to join the committee as well. So we'll try to reach out to anyone who's missed it. Because as I want to move to the legislative committee, because I don't see any questions. And Senator Mohammed had to go to court. So Caroline is going to give the legislative committee update for us.
I'll be very brief, guys. I just wanted to make you aware. I think, you know, the legislative committee sponsored the bipartisan panel that we hosted on Tuesday on criminal justice reform. It focused primarily on indigent defense and driver's license restoration. I first of all would like to give a shout out to Conservatives for Criminal Justice Reform. Tara Callahan on their staff was very, very helpful. I think we had a lot of really, really good panelists. I wish we'd had more time, frankly, so the conversation could have gone back and forth. Between our YouTube streaming and the actual WebEx event, we had about 70 attendees. And so the next time the legislative committee meets, Senator Mohammed is going to be discussing with the members whether we want to continue these, make them part of a series, and how to move forward. The other big thing, the legislative committee will meet on May the 19th at 8 a.m. They will be talking about, again, whether we want to continue these bipartisan panels as a series, turn them into a series. And I think the senator will be discussing and members will be discussing kind of things moving through the General Assembly at that point. And I'm going to give a call out to Representative Maury. I believe that Senator Mohammed spoke with her. Representative Maury, is there anything you wanted to call attention to that's moving through the General Assembly right now?
Thanks, Carolyn. I appreciate it. Yeah, just a few bills that have gone through the House that I think is important because it kind of looks at some of the recommendations of TREC. And it's, to me, concerning because it's really increasing criminal penalties. And if you want to look them up, there was a House Bill 237, criminal law revisions, that would criminalize and enhance a sentence of the underlying charge if anyone is wearing a mask, a hood, other clothing or device to conceal or to try to conceal their identity, especially, when a lot of people are wearing face masks. We know kids wear hoodies. That, I think it goes contrary to some of our recommendations in the past, but you just might look it up. It's in the House and will be debated. There's another bill, House Bill 534, protecting school employees, and assault by a student on a school official or a volunteer are pretty much class A1 misdemeanors. This bill would say if there's a subsequent or a second offense, it would be a class G felony. Once again, we're accelerating criminal penalties and making what could be a lot of kids exposed to a felony if there's a second assault on a school official. And then the last one that was passed this week in the House was House Bill 188. It's called the Student Conduct. And there was a provision in it that removes minor offenses from being considered to be long-term suspension eligible. I debated that bill, tried to get the minor offenses taken out of that. So kids that had a dress code violation or used inappropriate language or did not follow a teacher's directive would not be eligible to be long-term suspended. However, that language stayed in, and that will go on to the Senate. So those are just three of the bills that I've watched that really kind of contravene some of the efforts we've made on TREC on how it disproportionately impacts kids of color, especially in our schools. So if you have any questions, happy to answer. Sorry to take up so much time, but thanks for letting me add that.
Thank you. Anything else from the legislative committee?
There was one, and I'm sorry, Justice
No,
Earls.
please.
Senator Mohammed, there is good news on trying to expand the expunctions to also include breaking and entering class H and I's, that they would be eligible for expunctions. They have not been. So that would open up a whole new category of people that would be eligible after, I think, 15 years. So that's moving through, and that's good news. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I will just add that if you didn't weren't able to join us for the webinar on bipartisan criminal justice reform, I would say it's actually worth a look. Like think it's more like a podcast. Senator Mohammed did a great job of engaging the panelists, and it's a discussion. So I really it's worth a listen if you have the time. Local Policy Committee, Mike Hawkins.
Yes, thank you, Justice Earls, and I will be brief too. Just to recap, to remind people what the local committee does is to be outward facing with the localities around the state, to look at TREC recommendations that involve local action, either elected official action or agency action or organizational action that can be affected on the local level. And of course, North Carolina is a big state, so we're doing it in several different areas. I won't mention them all. I will mention two things in particular that we're working on. One being one subcategory that we've created for ourselves is grassroots and communications. That group is to develop a really do a mapping project of what are the stakeholder organizations around the state and breaking them down by regions, because some items might be more not important, but have greater emphasis in some regions than others. But we have begun doing that work to set up that database and that information base. It doesn't exist now. And once we get that done, that will be a tremendous resource, not just for our committee and not just for TREC, but I think it would be a tremendous resource for a lot of people in the state. Commend the staff people who are working on that. Ashby's the lead person on that, but also Brandy McCoy has done a ton of work on that. And we hope to have some results actually by our next quarterly meeting. The second area, and it's an area that we did in TREC 1.0, but it's our local outreach, our local elected officials outreach. And again, that's headed up by Jasmine and Ellen, but we have been fortunate enough to have good working relationships with the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners. We are also, thanks to Mayor Preston Blakely, who is part of our committee, task force member. He has helped us develop a relationship with the League of Municipalities that we're working with, and we're really excited about the potential of what might come from that in this coming year. That's been an area of focus over the past month or two. So several things going on, but those are the two things that I wanted to highlight. And thank the committee members and thank the staff support who are working, and they are working really hard on this. So any questions?
Okay, thank you. I don't see any questions, but thank you so much for that report. And a huge thank you to all of our committees and committee chairs for the tremendous work you've been doing. At this point, I turn it back over to Secretary Buffalo.
Thank you, Justice Earls. At this time, I'll entertain if any committee members has any new business. Not seeing any hands or open discussion. All right, I'll turn it back to you, ma'am, for public comment.
Yes, thank you. We have 3 people who have signed up for a 2-minute public comment slot. So we're ready to hear from Sandra Hardy with NC Cure. And I'm just waiting to see when she's promoted to panelist.
She has been promoted. If she could unmute herself, she could go ahead with her question.
Okay. Here I am. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you all for all your hard work. I'd like to tell you a little about our study of the administrative remedy procedure of the Department of Adult Corrections, or the grievance procedure, and our recommendations. NC Cure is a nonprofit that advocates for the humane treatment of people in our state prisons. We receive many letters from inmates about the grievance procedure. This is the only way that inmates can register complaints and seek solutions. We decided to investigate. We asked the ECU Department of Criminal Justice to do a qualitative analysis of our letters. Then we reviewed the publicly available reports of the Inmate Grievance Resolution Board for fiscal year 2021. The qualitative analysis of letters revealed that the initiation of grievances are often blocked, that retaliation occurs, and that grievance procedures are not followed by staff. We found that the types of investigations and actual outcomes of the IGRB are opaque. The IGRB goes along with the facility on 2/3 of the grievances. Since grievants are not asked to respond to the IGRB decisions, it is unknown whether an agreeable outcome is ever achieved. At the prison level, those who evaluate complaints are investigating their peers and their own institutions. This creates an inherent conflict of interest. Another conflict of interest is that the Office of the IGRB is funded and housed within DAC, and all its decisions are subject to DAC approval. These are clear examples, we believe, of the fox guarding the henhouse. On March 27, we shared our full report with Secretary Ishii and DAC and asked that they restore confidence in the grievance system. We recommend changes in the procedure to include improved methods of investigation at all levels, allowing prisoners to provide evidence, enforcing staff adherence to procedures, eliminating retaliation, and increasing system transparency. NCCure wants to be a part of these revisions because we represent the people who are incarcerated in our state. An effective grievance procedure will treat these individuals with dignity and respect and ultimately render our prisons and our communities safer.
Thank you.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah, so I just want to make sure you know that we can also accept written submissions. And so if there's a way to provide us a copy of the report, we would certainly welcome that, and any other written submission that you want to make as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Peter Van Dorsten from the North Carolina Council of Churches.
Yes. Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Great.
Wonderful. I also want to thank you. This has been a heartening experience listening to you all. And I feel to some degree I might be preaching to the choir. But let me just continue with my statement. I'm a member of the North Carolina Interfaith Cash Bail Reform Committee, a project under the auspices of the North Carolina Council of Churches, which is staffed by North Carolina church member volunteers who work on cash bail reform as educators and advocates. The immoral North Carolina for-profit cash bail system extracts money from people while they await trial. Those unable to pay can languish in jail for weeks or months. It is one reason jails are overcrowded and is the most expensive way to deal with nonviolent, low-level offenders who represent the majority of people charged with an offense. Even though the North Carolina law contains an express preference for non-financial conditions, secured bonds were imposed 68% of the time in 2018. The average cost per North Carolina inmate is over $30,000 a year. The use of summons or citations and pretrial release programs or release with supervision is much less expensive and would require fewer tax dollars to support. The American Bar Association is adamantly opposed to compensated sureties. They note that in a money bail system, the defendant's ability to post bail is completely unrelated to the risk of public safety. The poor and middle class who cannot afford the non-refundable fees nor put up assets as collateral are being discriminated against. Contrary to what is claimed in political ads, for-profit cash bail actually increases crime because pretrial detention disrupts lives. People unable to pay bail often plead guilty just to get out of jail, leaving with a criminal record. They leave jail poorer and are more likely to commit crimes due to desperation from job loss, loss of housing, or transportation or family issues. Cash bail is unnecessary and counterproductive for those accused of low-level nonviolent crimes. People miss court dates about as often as people fail to show up for other types of appointments, for reasons such as inability to get off work or arrange childcare. Court reminder systems or case managers are more effective. Lastly, the insurance companies who underwrite the bail industry have almost no losses due to bail forfeiture. It's their most profitable business, $2 billion a year in profit. The U.S. and the Philippines are the only countries in the world using for-profit cash bail. The U.S. military doesn't use it, and neither do many states in the U.S. Why do we?
Thank you for those comments. And I will repeat that we certainly welcome anything written that you have. And I'll also note that if you haven't seen the TREC report with our recommendations regarding the cash bail reform, that we welcome any reflections you have on what we've recommended. We're always open to considering what else should be done. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Then our third public member of the public is Eric Rowell.
Yes, thank you to the TREC committee for allowing me 2 minutes today to speak. My name is Eric Rowell. I'm a native of North Carolina, resident of Huntersville, North Carolina, currently here in Mecklenburg. I am a licensed attorney here in North Carolina, but I'm not formally involved with any organization. So I'm here today just to speak on the issue of civil asset forfeiture. I'm not going to go into detail. This group is pretty versed in the issue. I know you have spoken about this issue in prior committee meetings. But in particular, and I also want to thank Maria Perry for connecting me with this organization. Maria is an attorney in Durham who does some great work on this issue. So I've been following civil asset forfeiture for years, and recently I just decided I was tired of just posting about this on social media. I wanted to try to take action to try to really make people more aware of this issue outside of the folks on this call, right? The legal and the law enforcement communities. So basic plan of action that I put in place, raising awareness across the state. That starts with your local municipality. So it sounds like I need to connect with Mr. Hawkins and the local policy committee on this after the meeting. But the next step that I'm working on is submitting questions to local electeds in the 85 municipalities or cities or counties that took asset forfeiture funds in 2022. Couple that with records request about the funds and the source of the funds. And then I want to take all that information I'm hoping to compile, provide it to interested reporters. And then the final step of the plan is I've got to find some sympathetic legislators that are willing to potentially file legislation on this issue, either opting us out of the equitable sharing loophole or putting tighter restrictions on adoption or task force participation, either greater monetary restrictions or certain property restrictions, et cetera. Using Huntersville as an example, a success story we had just this week. For the first time ever, I think civil asset forfeiture expenditure was up for a vote. It was actually taken off of consent. There was a 20+ minute debate here in Huntersville that was really contentious, but we got a lot of concessions out of our major. Going forward, there's going to be a lot more transparency surrounding these expenditures, and I'm just hoping to replicate that statewide. So that's my time. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And if you aren't aware, so a great way to know how to reach the task force is at our website, which is ncdoj.gov/TREC, TREC. So
thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And so I appreciate all of the folks who've joined us to give us information about these really important issues. And with that, I will turn it back to Secretary Buffalo.
Hey, thanks everyone. Appreciate you all being attentive today and being on this call. And this will conclude this meeting. However, put on your calendars for next meeting will be Friday, July 28th. Friday, July 28th. That meeting will be from 10 a.m. to 12 noon. It will be virtual. So without any other business, I consider this meeting adjourned and have a great weekend. Thank y'all.